this opportunity to introduce our lunch speaker, David Williams. David joined the service in 1998 with Commissioner Rosati. Prior to his service with IRS, he spent some amount of time in the Treasury Department. He was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Legislative Affairs. He also spent time on Capitol Hill with then Senator Bradley and on the Senate Budget Committee. At IRS, he's held a wide variety of high-profile positions, including the Chief of Communication and Liaison. He was the person who was charged with running the TEDR program, we call it here, the Telephone Excise Tax Refund program that you guys will remember dearly or not so dearly as the case may be, and the Electronic Tax Administration Program Office and refundable tax credits. So no good deed going unpunished. He's now been tasked with leading the implementation stage of Commissioner Schulman's bold Return Prepare Oversight program. On a personal note, it has always been a pleasure to work with Dave. He is amongst the sharp and dedicated and certainly amongst the most articulate people I've ever worked with at IRS. And it is my distinct pleasure to introduce him to you all this afternoon.
I'm going to try to use this. How's that?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
You're just showing me up.
No, what you probably don't know is my other sideline is I actually work in the health club industry, and I teach classes using mics, so sometimes I get lucky. Good afternoon, everyone. I know that I am speaking to you while you're eating, so don't worry at all about that. Just save me some cake. I want to thank you all for inviting me today, and I'm going to give you some background information about what you're doing, or what we're doing. Before I start, though, I did want to make one comment, though, and I know that you all will probably have questions. My message to you today is that we recognize that the steps we're taking with regard to return, prepare, oversight, and regulation could have and may well have a significant impact on your own professional standing as enrolled agents. And we want to work with you to make sure that we've got the right messaging and that we are able to distinguish the benefits and the value that this community adds so that taxpayers and consumers themselves can make... Did you just adjust that down?
I just did.
Okay. There we go.
You were starting to feedback.
There we go. Sorry, yes. So that taxpayers really do understand the distinctions and what it means to be an enrolled agent. So more about that later, but I do know and I have heard anecdotally and directly about the concern, and I can understand why you may have it. I'm hopeful that we can work together to help resolve and address those issues. But first, let me describe what we are doing, and then I'll open it up. For those of you who do not follow these things closely, there were a couple of steps that got us to the point in January of this year where we actually announced that we plan to bring return preparers under regulation. The first, by the way, was a look at the value that tax return preparers in what some folks call the tax ecosystem. In other words, while people think of the IRS as administering the tax code, the truth is we can't do it without you folks. All right? We don't do it alone. There's a system of people out there, and frankly, the system would fail if, in fact, we didn't recognize the value that the tax professional community brings. If you take, and you'll see these numbers in the report, if you take the numbers of individual tax returns that are done by tax professionals and add to that the number that are done by individuals using tax software, you're well over 80% of all tax returns filed in the country today. The IRS cannot afford to ignore or recognize the value that those institutions bring into the tax preparation process. And as a result, we included a look at tax return preparers in our strategic plan. You may also know, by the way, that there has been pressure or a strong set of recommendations from the National Taxpayer Advocate to look at tax return preparer oversight and regulation. A number of states have done it as well. And the General Accountability Office, I believe is the current governmental, it changes, GAO, did a study on this, looked at states, and recommended the IRS look at it. So in June, under a new commissioner, we launched a look at the tax return preparer industry. The review, if you will, was headed by our Deputy Commissioner for Operation Support, a gentleman named Mark Ernst, who has long experience in tax administration because he is the former CEO of H&R Block. Working with Mark as the co-lead is Karen Hawkins, who is the director of the Office of Professional Responsibility, which is the office, as you know, that administers Circular 230, practice before the IRS. So under Karen and Mark's leadership, they put together a team. They looked at a lot of issues. They had public hearings at which many folks testified. And ultimately, they developed a proposal that I'm going to talk to you more about today. One other little surprise grace note for the IRS was this legislation that popped up in November. So in addition to creating 2 more refundable first-time homebuyer, actually one isn't first-time, one's long-time, but 2 more homebuyer credits to add to the 2 we already have, so we now have 4, and some net operating loss changes. At the end of the tax bill was a provision that says anyone who prepares tax returns and reasonably expects to file more than 10 tax returns will have to file them electronically in 2011. We have asked for filing electronic mandate legislation. We never asked for a threshold of 10. We assumed it would be 100. We were hoping that we could work. We would take some time. We never anticipated it would come so quickly. It was a big surprise. So as we're thinking about return preparers, in comes the mandate, and frankly, it affects a lot of the same communities. So my responsibility is to take the recommendations that were in the return preparer report, add the e-file mandate piece to it, and implement them all by the end of the year, which isn't going to happen, just in case you're wondering, and I'll explain why that is. Because I'm just not going to kill myself. I'm close enough as it is. So what are we doing? And I will bounce back and forth a little bit, but my focus and my goal right now is to have a vendor in place who will deliver a web-based interface no later than September 1 of this year that will allow every single tax return preparer, and they'll be required to do so, to obtain a PTIN, prepare a tax ID number, after they pay a fee. And I'll explain the fee in a moment. So if you are an unenrolled tax preparer today, you will have to go to the website, you'll type some basic information in, you'll answer a couple of questions, 2 of which I'll talk about right now. One is, are you current on your tax obligations? And the second is, have you been convicted of a felony in the past 10 years? Now we're going to ask those questions with the understanding that we aren't able to check it during the registration process. Because our goal is to get everyone to obtain a PTIN, or if you already have one, I like to refer to it as Febreze your PTIN. It'll freshen it up a little bit so that it's good. So that if you already have one, it's valid. And we're doing that for 2 reasons. One, the user fee is actually designed to recover some costs, and I'll explain how that will relate to the EA fee in a moment. But we also want to clear out PTINs that are not being used. And so our goal is to put basically somewhere between 900,000 and 1 million people through this system between September 1 and essentially the beginning of January, or for some folks, whenever they begin to prepare tax returns.